I'm Marie Vigourou.
And I'm Jeremy Greer.
And this is Rude Eats, a delicious podcast where we sink our teeth into every episode of the show Hannibal. And today we are covering Season 1, Episode 2, Amuse-bouche.
I want Will Graham, I really do. And I think that we could have some fun. Then you can do anything you like. I might even go and help you catch the shrike. I want Will Graham, I want that man. For every meal and on demand. His mind shines and his body's cut. I know that he works for the FBI, but what other man has pure empathy and the ability to see my mind? Jack, what other thing have I ever asked you for? Besides, never looking into my pantry? And I won't get that either. Damn. I want Will Graham, I want him so. And he really doesn't need to know what's in my meals or on my mind. I just want Will Graham to be mine. I want him and I want him now. I said before, I don't care how. I'll give him tests, he'll draw a clock. And then his dark desires I will unlock. We'll be together, Will and me. We'll throw some grand dinner parties. We'll cut the flesh, we'll cook the meat. He'll eat the food just like me. Give me goddamn Will Graham.
Jeremy, how are we feeling today?
Feeling extremely great. I'm super excited to talk about this episode. Super excited to hear your thoughts and opinions. I don't think anyone may be more excited than Autumn, who, when I told her we were recording today, said, "Does that mean we get to watch the next episode?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely." She's 100% back in. She just wants to binge the entire series again. So her going at our pace is excruciating for her. So shout outs to my wife, Autumn.
Yeah, thank you so much for being such a good team player about this. I appreciate that.
What episode are we covering today?
So we are covering Amuse-bouche, episode 2 of season 1, where Will Graham helps Jack Crawford search for a killer who buries his victims alive to grow mushrooms. Will, starting to trust Hannibal, opens up about killing Hobbs, and Freddie Lounds lurks around the investigation.
Yeah, some new characters are introduced. I'm very excited. First, I think we'll kind of start off with talking about the title and the theme of this episode. The title is Amuse-bouche. From Wikipedia, an amuse-bouche or an amuse-ghoul is a single bite-sized, forgot how to say that word.
Hors d'oeuvre.
Hors d'oeuvre. Amuse-bouche are different from appetizers in that they are not ordered from a menu by patrons, but are served free and according to the chef's selection alone. These are served both to prepare the guest for the meal and to offer a glimpse of the chef's style. The term in French literally means mouth amuser. The plural form, blah, 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 blah. We don't need to know the plural form. I just find it interesting that amuse-bouche is not even listed in dictionaries because it came about in the 1980s only on restaurant menus. So it's not even like a word. It's mostly amuse-ghoul. The Wikipedia also had some other stuff where amuse-ghoul could be a derogatory thing, which I found kind of fascinating. But we don't have to delve off too far into that because we're just dealing with amuse-bouche today.
Right. Well, so the thing is that gueule, so amuse-gueule is usually it's when you're talking about somebody's face, and it's not usually a nice thing to say. So you wouldn't usually say, because technically saying ta gueule is like saying shut up, right?
Okay.
So, but amuse-gueule itself is not necessarily a bad thing to say. And that's actually how I knew of amuse-bouche. I've never, in France or within the family that I am, I guess, they would always talk about amuse-gueule versus amuse-bouche.
Interesting.
And think peanuts at a bar. Right? That's kind of what it is. It's something that's just served on the table. A lot of the time also bread in the United States is just served for free. Sometimes biscuits, depending where you're going. Yeah, there you go. Amuse-bouche.
And in the United States, especially in the South, they'll just give you a bottle of ranch dressing on the table, no matter where you're eating. So
really?
I feel like that's an amuse-bouche for most. No, not really. I mean, they probably would if you asked.
Oh my god, that's my dream. I love ranch sauce.
Just a giant bottle of ranch on the thing.
Wow.
I think of course
the French would hate it, but I love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think obviously every single episode of this season is going to be named after a course of a meal. Last episode was an aperitif, and this episode is amuse-bouche, which is a little bit more substantial, but obviously not anything that is a full course. I think like being able, the thing that I picked out the most was like a glimpse of the chef's style. And I think that's what we're seeing here is a glimpse of where this TV show is going to go. We're forming all of these connections. We'll talk about connections a lot this episode, I think. And we're starting to see characters open up from their initial first episode pilot. It's interesting watching this now from more of a critical perspective as opposed to just from an entertainment perspective. And I'm curious how you were viewing this as you watched the episode overall and kind of with the themes that you were picking out.
You know, it's actually really challenging for me to be watching this for the first time and to be really critical about it because I don't know where it's going, right? So there's a lot of things that I'm like, I feel like this is going to be really important, but I don't know the actual weight of it right now. So I think I'm going to say that a couple times today. And before we move into the beat by beat, I just want to like make one other connection, right? Because we said we were going to talk about that. But amuse-bouche and apéritif are quite connected themselves, right? One is usually served with the other. And I kind of feel like these two episodes also belong together very, very much. So not having seen the rest of the series, I don't know if we're going to jump forward a little bit more in the next episode. But these two episodes clearly, like one is clearly the sequel to another.
Yeah, I think you were, if I remember correctly, you were a little surprised as we were chatting about this episode about how directly it picked up from the previous one, right? Just how much it referenced back. And I think that's something this show is going to be really strong at because the format makes you think it's going to be Monster of the Week. Where we're going to deal, it's a new serial killer every time. How many do we have in America? So many. Like we have to deal with this all the time. But I think like the connective tissue around all of the Monster of the Week
I see that.
is really what like pulls you in, right? Like it's the stuff that really makes the show something special. And as we get into more episodes, we'll see that more and more. So I'm excited. I think also just the idea of like the serial killer this week mentioned like grows mushrooms from bodies, and there's chat about how mushrooms are vaguely like sentient, like they form connections with one another. They can respond to outside stimulus in weird ways. Like they make music. There's all this stuff, like all this weird mushroom stuff. Like people get real into mushrooms, and you're like, okay, like mushrooms and crystal people, calm down just a little bit. I respect you, but just like dial it down just a hair. You're coming on a little too strong. Is all I'm saying. Fill up your crystals. That's fine. Do it. Just like maybe leave me out of it for 5 minutes. Like I just don't need to anyway. But I love the idea of like the actual killer this week, like going along with our theme of this connectivity, of this like forming those connections. In fact, towards the end of the episode, he's literally going to say he wants Will and Abigail to make a connection, to be together. And it's just really, it's just like, it's smart. And it's so rare that I get to watch smart TV that I'm so excited to talk about it.
Oh. You know, it's so the thing is that in this episode, right, we're like we said, we're talking about connection. We're starting to see, obviously, Will and Hannibal develop a relationship, and we're going to see that very visually represented through the episode. We're also seeing like how the different characters are connected to each other, right? People that we kind of knew of that are actually much more connected to our existing pool of characters that we weren't necessarily expecting. Mm-hmm. But I really think that the heart of this episode is really about Will finding connections with others, but also within himself. So,
yeah. And with that, let's take it to the beat by beat.
Yeah.
We're going to start out today with Will at the shooting range. He is not hitting the target very well. And as he pulls the sheet closest to him, to see, exactly where he was shooting on the target, it turns into Garrett Jacob Hobbs. And then he starts like freaking out and starts firing as fast as he can. And then is shortly thereafter woken up by Jack. And obviously our boy is not doing too well.
So yeah, he's having nightmares, and it's also the fact that he's not just having nightmares at night, right? He's just like falling asleep for a second and it's like, boom, in the car, nightmare. So it's really like, it has really taken a toll on him, what happened with Hobbs.
We talked a lot about last week about the separation of Will's mental world and his physical world, right? And his ability to kind of move between them. And like, we're starting to see, like, I think this is kind of a signal of like stuff's starting to kind of maybe bleed over a little bit if you're starting to just like take a quick nap in a car and then seeing this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
But Hobbs is on his mind because he's woken up to go inspect Garrett Jacobs Hobbs' hunting cabin. This is the place where presumably he murdered all of the women. And it is a very typical hunting cabin until they get upstairs, where they find an entire room decorated with antlers, floor to ceiling, all over the place, white, bright white, obviously treated antlers. And it's very, very creepy.
Well, so I was like, well, I've seen animals and antlers, and like I not many people know this, but I do come from a hunting family, but I've never seen this before. And I was like, that is very creepy to me. So I wanted to kind of like take the temperature with you to see if you thought that was creepy too, or if you're like, no, that's just normal.
100%. Yeah.
Okay,
so
cool.
I grew up in the deep South. So like most of the men in my family, including a lot of the women too, hunted. We had, deer hung up on walls and all that kinds of stuff. And yeah, nothing close to this, nothing at all like this. I think the only time I've seen something like this was in like the first season of True Detective, and it's also extremely creepy there. So I think it's like stuff like this is weird. Because the show definitely makes us feel like it's weird through the music, through everything. Like it is meant to be seen as creepy. And also the fact that antlers, like we talked about in the last episode, like they're meant to be like a symbol for paternity and masculinity. And so obviously that's a reminder of Hobbs's issues with like his own masculinity and paternity as his daughter is like getting ready to leave the home. But it's also like, how is that connected to Will, I think, is my question. Because anyway, I'll get to that later. But yeah. Will comments kind of out loud, I think poking at Jack a little bit, that this could be a part of his Evil Minds Museum. And Jack, I think poking at Will a little bit, wonders if Abigail is a suspect, having spent a bunch of time at this cabin. And Will shuts this down almost immediately, saying that Garrett Jacob Hobbs probably just almost definitely killed alone. And that's kind of fascinating to me, and I think for you as well.
Truly, because like he just rejects that entirely immediately, and he is just annoyed at the thought, and it felt very Mulder to me. Because like Mulder will make these huge jumps like on the X-Files obviously, and he's like imagining things that are like completely unreasonable, and he's saying those things out loud, and he's like, oh, of course this is what must have happened. And it's outlandish, and yet he's almost always right. And I'm kind of wondering if this show is going to be the same trope for Will, or a similar trope for Will.
In the first episode where Will and Jack meet for the first time, or just have their first conversation, I should say, Jack tells Will, so that's going to keep happening in every episode, apparently. That's got to be a thing that I do, is get these two people's names confused. Jack tells Will that he makes these jumps, right? These like Mulder jumps, let's call them. And Will responds like, the evidence supports it, but it seems like the evidence always supports it after the fact. So he's making the leaps and then he's backing it up with evidence, but like here, we don't see the evidence of that. Like we don't see him, like he doesn't go through his like mind thing. He just immediately just says, absolutely not, Garrett Jacob Hobbs killed alone. So I'm curious, just like you are, whether or not this is going to be a thing or not, like how he's going to like this is going to come up again. So
well, I mean, I know that you know, but I appreciate that you're like, oh, I wonder, just like you, I wonder if this is going to show up again.
Thinking face emoji.
Exactly.
Will also finds a red hair on the scene, and then we cut to our first meeting of Freddie Lowndes, who is updating her internet blog, Tattle Crimes. sort of like a trashy true crime stuff. In the books, it's interesting how they modernize this to like an internet blog, because in the books, this dude Freddie Lounds is just a tabloid guy, right? Like he runs like a National Enquirer type paper about true crime. So he's always trying to get these grisly, photos of the dead and try to post them and everything like that. He's working cops to try to get info. Very much the same that Freddie Lounds in the series is going to do, just in a more modern setting.
I feel like if this were to be remade today, she would be running a crime podcast.
Absolutely, 100%. Like Freddie would love to podcast. she would be. Freddie would absolutely like, and she would just do it on her own too. Like she's like, I don't need a co-host. I'm just going to do this all by myself.
No. There you go. She would have a very successful Patreon too. Good for her.
Absolutely. She'd basically be the murder mystery chicks. I can't remember the Murder by Podcast or whatever, like the real successful murderinos.
Like
yeah.
I don't really. Yeah, it's not my thing. But yes, absolutely.
We cut from here to our intro screen for the first time. I love this because it's short and it's cool. Like it doesn't get in the way. Yeah. It's got weird music. It's got some weird visuals. How did this hit you for the first time?
I mean, I was a little surprised. I was like, oh, we get an intro. Oh, that's so cool. And then I'm like, oh, is it wine? It's people? It's wine that forms people? Is it blood? I don't
know. We should always be asking. If blood is not in the scene, we should be asking, is it blood?
I know. Oh my God. Oh, this episode. Oh, anyway, yes.
We go back to the show. Will walks into his classroom where his students begin a standing ovation, and he instantly hates this, and he shuts it down immediately. He does not feel like he deserves any sort of praise for this, and he even expounds on that when he talks about like, what was the clue? Tell me who found if you can see the clue. And as his class is kind of like, I think one person raises their hands and he just shuts them down. He's like, there is no clue. It was bad bookkeeping and dumb luck. And like, it's just, I think that's the reason he's shutting down this prize. Like he was just lucky. Like he just happened to see a thing go a place and that was it.
But sometimes that's also how that works, right? Like, I mean, because a lot of the conversation in this episode, I'm realizing now as we're talking about it, is around like the process of investigation, right? And so earlier, they had this talk about how, of course, she's not implicated, but he has no evidence. And maybe he's going to get lucky this time, too, but maybe not. Right. Like if you don't actually have evidence to support what you're saying. And this is true. I'm talking about this as if I know how police investigations work. I don't. But I know how scientific investigations work. And like you can't just make the evidence make the point that you wanted to make in the like originally. Right. You have to follow the findings and the evidence and the results, not the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you this is totally off topic, but have you encountered any of this Terrence Howard / Neil deGrasse Tyson stuff on the internet lately? Do you know anything about this?
I mean, it's a feud, isn't it? Like where they get mad at what is it? No, I don't know.
So
Tell me.
Terrence Howard is claiming that he's invented like different science, basically, and the foundation of it is 1 × 1 = 2. And he's gone on like the Joe Rogan podcast and talked about this stuff. He's done his own like videos on YouTube to talk about all of this weird stuff and how it fundamentally changes the world and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And recently Neil deGrasse Tyson was like, yeah, he actually sent me his thing. And I think he spends about an hour breaking down why it's complete bullshit. and he's doing it like with the Neil deGrasse Tyson, like, oh, I'm a friendly guy kind of way. But he's also saying like, this is complete bullshit. And one of the points he makes is like, right, you may have some valid points, but you haven't done any research. None of this is peer reviewed. You haven't submitted this. You haven't talked to anybody in the field to find out if people have had this idea and already had it disproved. You haven't figured out any of this stuff. You're just writing stuff on a piece of paper and assuming that it's true. And it very much reminded me of this. And it's also just funny because like, I don't know, just seeing people get mad at each other about like science is very amusing to me. But yeah.
I mean, when scientists start like being mad at each other, that's when it gets really funny, to be honest with you.
It's
because
good.
I've seen it and it's like, oh, wow.
Back in the classroom, Will, as he starts to talk about his experience with Garrett Jacob Hobbs, he starts to flash back. Again, another example of this intruding on his life, right? Like this is obviously something that is very significant to him.
And it's really well done, I find. As somebody who experiences flashbacks, like this is so well done that I really hate it. Like, thank you so much. Like, good job. Very good job.
He also tells the class about the copycat. I think as part of the study of the case, it's probably important to mention this. Obviously, they haven't caught the copycat yet. So it's interesting that they're bringing it up now. I think just maybe reminding the audience that it happened in the last episode.
Well, there you go. I feel like this is part of what made it feel so incredibly connected also to the last episode, right? Because this could have easily been like just hand waved away or like swept under the rug. Like, you know, we needed a narrative device to show Will who Garrett Jacobs Hobbs was or wasn't, and we're not going to talk about this again, right? But they do. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, is it really necessary to keep this, or is this something like, is this how we're going to find out or start to kind of like have our suspicions about Hannibal? Like, I just don't know, right? And so it's
excellent questions.
I'm excited.
Excellent questions, Paul.
Okay, I'll let it go.
At the end of the class, Alana Bloom arrives. She's kind of sheepish because she realizes that she's kind of as part of ambushing Will with Jack, and Jack arrives very shortly after. They're basically here because Jack wants Will to go back in the field, and to be able to do that, he has to have a psychiatric evaluation, which he wants Jack to do with not Alana, because Alana is a little too close. She's Jack's friend, but with, Hannibal Lecter. And Jack immediately is like, therapy doesn't work on me, which is a good sign that you probably need to do a little therapy, if I had to guess. Like, I'm not an expert. I'm just saying, like, if you start out with that, like, you probably need to talk to somebody.
Right.
And
so here's the thing. Like, I do agree with that, like, in probably 90% of cases, but like, because Jack also says, like, it won't work because you won't let it. And I personally had a visceral reaction to this, because it's actually not super unusual for autistic people to feel like therapy or conventional therapy doesn't work on them the way that it can possibly work for neurotypical people. And it has nothing to do with them like not letting therapy work. It's just that there are different kinds of therapy out there, and that not all of them like work for everybody. And so, like, if you're autistic and you've had issues with therapy before, like not being particularly helpful, it's not your fault, right? It's just that your therapist didn't like adapt to your specific needs.
Absolutely. This is one of the things that I have to keep reminding myself, because I think Will is presented in the show as very neurotypical outside of his like moments, that it's easy for me to forget that he's on the spectrum, and like those kind of issues would work very differently for him than it would a neurotypical person, right? So it's something I'm going to have to keep reminding myself of. I'm so glad that you brought this up, because it makes so much sense. That line makes way more sense. If therapy doesn't work on me, probably because he's never had a therapist to actually try to work with who Jack is, and not what what the therapist thinks Jack is.
Well, there you go. Exactly. And I think I have some thoughts about that for a little bit later that I'd love to share, but it's, I think Will is like really good at masking, right? Like he's high, quote unquote, high functioning, which is a term that I really dislike, but like he is high functioning, and he masks a lot of the time to be able to like, live his life. And yeah, it's easy to forget just because he is like he's very excellent at his job. He's able to like show up on time. He's able to do a lot of things that some autistic people are not able to do. And so I just, little reminder there that therapy and autism isn't always easy to deal with.
We also have a bit of an insight into Jack, who says that, this is more than a formality. He needs to do this so that he can sleep at night, because he was worried that Will got too close to the case. And he specifically asked the question, how many nights did you spend in Abigail's hospital room? And I think that's, like, we talked about earlier, the connective tissue between episode 1 and episode 2. And this is showing, like, there's more of that's not even, that we don't even see, right? Like, there's more to that connection than we can even see in the show. So I wanted to point that out specifically, because I think it's fascinating. From here, we head over to Hannibal's office. Maybe my favorite set, probably. Like, I just love... You know how, like, the bunker, like, once you get to the bunker in Supernatural, you're like, this is good. Like, I feel like Hannibal's office is just amazing. Like, who doesn't want, like, a second story library, right? Like, that's so cool. I want that in my house.
I know. I mean, listen, as a girly who loved Beauty and the Beast growing up,
right?
like a library with multiple like different stories is just like, my dream. So yes, very much so.
Exactly my takeaway from Beauty and the Beast, because my sister would watch that movie over and over and over again, and I was just be like, get to the library part. Get to the library part. There's a couple of interesting things that happen right off the bat. So the first thing I think that's remarkable is that Hannibal rubber stamps the psychiatric eval. He basically is just like, look, here it's done. Like you're good to go back to work. And he says that this is so he can get it out of the way so that they can have an actual conversation. And this is like, again, this is one of those interesting audience things where we know Hannibal is a bad dude. Like we know,
yes.
we know like he's probably eating people. Like you don't get the name Hannibal the Cannibal without eating somebody. So this is one of those like chaos moves that I mentioned in the last episode, right? Of just like, here's the rubber stamp. I don't care if he's okay to be in the field or not. I just want to talk to my boy Will. I want that man. I want him so.
I want him so.
Like, and I find it. I just love it so much that he's just instantly like, okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder if it's not like because he's actually a really good therapist, right? Because Will does say earlier, like, I know all the tricks, right? And so Hannibal knows that if he like doesn't rubber stamp this, like Will is just not going to be able to speak to him. He's going to speak to him keeping in mind that he has the power to approve or disapprove his return to the field.
Exactly.
And so I feel like Hannibal really gets it immediately, like with all the little psychoanalyzing that we got in the last episode. Like Hannibal already knows what this man is made of, right? And he wants him so. We know this. And so he's like, all right, there you go. Like, let's just talk.
And we begin the conversation by talking about Abigail Hobbs, who is the daughter of the person that Will shot in the first episode. We haven't seen Abigail. She was in the hospital, having her entire neck gutted by her father. And Hannibal wonders out loud, like if Will feels any obligation or if he feels like he's Abigail's surrogate father. And he specifically said because Will orphaned her, which is a wild thing to say to Will Graham. Because no, he did not. He did absolutely like he didn't kill his mom. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he didn't kill her mom. Like it's very,
right.
It's a very aggressive thing to say to Will. But of course, I think this plays into Will's guilt about having shot a human person. And Will is so good at this that he kind of reflects this back on Hannibal and says, what about you? And Hannibal answers with a directness that is very, very surprising. Almost every time I watch this, I'm very, very surprised, where he says that he feels a staggering amount of obligation and that he has fantasized about different scenarios with different outcomes. And he just immediately says this to Will, and you can tell with Will's response that this makes him trust Hannibal even more, that Hannibal is willing to say this about himself.
Well, I think this plays into the same thing that I was saying before, right? Because if you try, like in a therapist's office, to be like, well, what about you? Therapist is going to be like, well, depending on the therapist, but some of them might say, well, we're not here to talk about me, we're here to talk about you. Or like, they're going to come up with something about the fact that like you're turning it around on them. But very few of them would actually answer honestly the way that Hannibal does, right? Or seemingly honestly, because I don't even know if he's on it. Like, I don't know, right? But it feels genuine in that sense. And I think that Will is kind of like taken aback by that. He's like, oh, okay, so he's not actually doing the therapist thing. Like he is having a conversation with me. And it's interesting because also Will is putting like as much physical distance as possible between them, right? Like he's up on the mezzanine, like on the second story library, whereas Hannibal is in his office, like in the center, like on the first floor. Mm-hmm. And I just think also that like if you think about it, if you put aside the fact that Hannibal is probably a cannibal or very certainly a cannibal, like it's pretty professional of him to immediately adapt your therapy style to suit your client. So again, very professional if it wasn't for the fact that he is completely in love with him already. So anyway, just putting that out there.
Just a note on the physical space too. As this conversation unfolds, Will begins to get closer and closer to him before they're finally like sitting down from across from one another. Will brings up Jack's belief that Abigail could possibly be an accomplice. And both of them find this "quote unquote" vulgar, and I'm emphasizing vulgar because it's something when we talk about Hannibal's character, we there's things that Hannibal absolutely abhors in people, and I think vulgarity is one. And I wanted to bring this up specifically because it's in a kind of an overlap in their taste. Like, here's two different men who couldn't be more different from each other, just in like the way they carry themselves, the way they present themselves, but they're finding this overlap, and they're finding these comparative things that they both don't like, right? And that's the start of that relationship, is finding those commonalities. Really just fascinating stuff. And then there's a line, as they continue to talk about, whether or not this is therapy or support group, Hannibal has a line that says, "The mirrors in your mind can reflect the best of yourself and not just the worst of someone else." And this, what a line. Just what an absolute line.
It's said with so much weight. And again, like, I think that, this actor is outstanding, right? But like, it's said with so much weight. It has so much gravitas in the moment that, like, I can tell that it's going to be important, but I'm not sure that I fully understand it yet. Like, I feel like this is one of those things that I'm going to go back and be like, oh my God, you remember that line that he said back in episode 2? Yeah, there you go. This episode might be my bugs, like, it might be the episode that I refer back to all the time.
I was listening to the most recent Carrie and Wayward that came out, and y'all referenced bugs again, and I was so happy about it. So it's so funny.
I'm very upset about this. Like, I'm very upset that Bugs has become such a foundational episode in my analysis.
It's the concrete that
happy.
The whole show is built upon. It's so good. I think this line, without going into spoiler territory or future episodes, I think just what we have seen so far, we can pull out some details, because in the first meeting of Hannibal and Will, they talked about setting up these forts in their mind, right? Of seeing too deeply into somebody if you look them directly in the eyes. And then obviously there's this concept that Will is so empathic that he can almost literally get into somebody's brain, the brains of these killers, to see their motivations and the reason why they do the things that they do. And the concern that we've seen from Jack and Alana both is that doing that can affect Will so that he forgets who he is. And I think that's what this line is specifically referencing, as well as, like, I think it's deeper than that as well, but just very specifically, like, it can reflect the best of yourself, not just the worst of somebody else. Like, you don't have to just have these people in your brain. It can be the best of yourself. Very, very good. Very, very good stuff.
Yeah.
At this point, anytime Will and Hannibal are in a conversation like this, it's very difficult to take notes, because all I want to do is just like swim in the dialogue, because it's so good. Like, it's so wordy and so beautiful. And I guess I looked over at Autumn and I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to take notes on this. I'm just going to write down every line.
I feel that. I felt the same way. I had to pause. I was like, I need to pause. I need to think.
Yeah, right. So we go to 3 teenage kids in the woods who stumble upon a large mushroom plot. And very quickly realize it's not just mushrooms. There's people under there. There's a line read where one of the kids says, "That's not marijuana," which I think is just very funny. It's just super, super good. Yeah. We cut over to Will, who is back at the range. And this time our friend Beverly comes to get him to come to this case. But first, she's going to get in his personal space a little bit. Beverly's character in the last episode, kind of needled him about not passing the FBI agent or FBI testing stuff, because, it's supposed to weed out I can't remember the word she used, but weed out the
instability.
The instability.
Unstable,
Thank you.
I think is what she said.
And here she seems to be just like very confidently getting in his space, where she's adjusting his stance for shooting to improve his aim. And she kind of she makes a very macabre joke about whether or not they were going to give him the bullets that they pulled out of Garrett Jacob Hobbs, which is very super gross. That's also like something that Breaking Bad does way in the future. That is
oh really?
Yeah. There's a moment where a character like gets like a souvenir from him killing somebody, and it just really fucks with him. Like, it just really it's not like a fun thing to keep on your desk. Everybody, like, that's really fucked up. So.
Oh my God. Ugh. I had to stop watching Breaking Bad. It was too much.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's so, yeah. So I think in this case, like, Beverly seems to be really intrigued by Will. She's like, oh my God, he's so weird, but like, he seems so interesting. I think that, with the very, like you said, macabre jokes that she makes, throughout the episode, like you can kind of see that this is a person who likes unusual things, right? Like, and who's not afraid of things that people would typically be afraid of. You know, like she works with dead bodies, she works on crime scenes, like, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it kind of makes sense that she would be really, really interested by this weird guy, really, who is Will Graham.
Especially since he's directly a part of her team now, right? Like she's not necessarily reporting to him, but like she's definitely like giving all of her findings to Will to help with this case. We jump back over to the crime scene. They have excavated some of the bodies. This is like a classic Hannibal, super gross, like, why did you guys put this on national television kind of thing. I love it so much. It's so good. I just, it's unreal how realistic this looks and how just super gross it is.
I mean, first of all, I'm a mushroom hater to begin with, because I always felt, and it's weird, but like since I was a kid, I've always hated mushrooms, and I would always say, I feel like it's because they're alive, right? When you're eating them. And I always hated that. And knowing a little bit more about like fungi, I'm like, well, that makes sense that I would feel that way, because look at them. It's freaking alive. Anyway, that aside, the shots were really, it was gross on purpose, but at the same time, like we get another shot of a body like covered in mushrooms later, and it looks like a sculpture. Like these props are truly works of art, and I'm like so amazed of the attention that they put into making them look beautiful in their grossness. You know, like there's a relationship there between like disgust and beauty that I find really interesting.
There's a video game series that is near and dear to my heart called Dark Souls. And of course. First, to take a shot. Probably won't be the first time I bring it up. But the director of the series is a man named Hideo Miyazaki, and he's relatively famous for making these creatures in these video games, but not having his team make like gross creatures. Like he wants to give them pathos and sadness. So like when they would bring a creature design to him, he'd be like, okay, this is a good starting point, but like let's make this like somehow sad at the same time, and let's make it like, let's give it some history, right, to make it meaningful. Not that it's just like a dragon that's like dead and spewing poison or something, right? Like we have to have something meaningful to it. And I feel like Hannibal does a really good job of like, we're not just going to show you a dead body, like we're going to quote unquote respect you by like making it a work of art almost every time. And if you think this is good, girl, just wait. we are in for it.
Oh my god, I'm so excited. And honestly, like, because I had been told like a lot of this show is like very, very graphic, and I'm like, I see that. At the same time, I feel like this is the kind of graphic that I can really handle, you know.
Jack and Will arrive at the crime scene. There's been 9 bodies. They were buried in high nutrient compost and buried alive with feeding tubes, which sounds like the worst way to die. We see Truly. Freddie Lowndes lurking around the crime scene, working the local cops for info, asking about Will Graham. And then Will begins his process. We see, again, the sweep hand come, the music kind of swell up, the mushroom bodies start to disappear, and we see the mushrooms literally ungrow. Like we see them like go back into the ground in a real neat physical effect. And then he opens his eyes and he begins to bury one of the bodies and do his narration like he normally does. This boy is alive that he's burying, but he's not conscious. Will says that he won't know that he's dying, but I don't need him to. Like that's not part of this process. That's not part of this design. And then unexpectedly, the body turns into Garrett Jacob Hobbs, who then grabs onto Will, and Will is shaken out of his mental space back into the physical world and realizes that one of these bodies is actually still alive. And everything goes crazy.
I mean, this scene is pure chaos, right? And it happens I love how unexpected it is, because like you've seen Will do this before. You've seen him like go through his mind palace, for lack of a better word. But like he just like does his thing, and then you come back and it's kind of like okay, well that feels good. And so you expect the same thing to happen here, but here it's like, oh my God. Anyway, it took me a second to realize what was going on. I was like, wait, is he really alive, or is that what happened? What is reality? Like I was confused about what part was reality and what part was Will's mind. And so I can't even imagine him if I was confused as the viewer.
I love a show that very delicately can do that, can make you question what is really happening in the show. It's too easy to kind of ham-fistedly do that sometimes, but if you can get that balance of just enough unreality to like make me think like something weird is happening, you got me hooked. I'll watch all of the episodes. So Will goes back to Hannibal and tells him about his hallucination. This is I think one of our first examples of Will seeking external help directly to Hannibal this time, and just basically saying like,
very true, like,
well, I don't know what is happening. I don't like this is concerning. And Hannibal, accurately or not, just dismisses this as stress. Yeah.
Well, so I have a little question here that I don't know if I'll ever find out about or not, but like he says something about the last time he was in the field. But the thing is, like, when I started this episode, I thought that Will had never really, quote unquote, been in the field because he had never passed the test at the FBI, right? But it turns out that no, he was in homicide before. So is he talking about the last time when he killed Hobbs, or is he talking about the last time before that? Like, I'm a little confused about that. But Hannibal seems to jump immediately to like, you brought back like a surrogate daughter. And so I'm like, of course that's part of it, but obviously given what he's seeing, that's not all of it, right? Like he clearly, something was changed in his mind, in his brain. For now anyway.
And it's that connection between the mental and the physical that Will has, right? Like it's like Hannibal says, you brought back a surrogate daughter, and you know, he brought back Abigail Hobbs, but he also brought back Garrett Jacob Hobbs living in his brain. And that's exactly a much more mental thing. And this is where the conversation gets a little real, where Hannibal says, is it harder to imagine the thrill of someone else killing now that you've killed yourself? And I love Will's reaction where he like takes this question in and thinks about it and then just very silently nods. Like he can't even verbalize the changes that he's going through, like the changes that he's experiencing in his body since he killed Garrett Jacob Hobbs. To answer one of your questions, in the general fiction, Will used to be a cop. So he like worked homicide and did homicide stuff and then got recruited by the FBI. So like stuff in the field has definitely happened. I believe this is the first time that he's killed somebody in the line of duty.
I think so. I think they say something that, you know, at the beginning that they weren't sure that he was able to pull the trigger, and he pulled the trigger 10 times, you know, like
exactly. Kind of so I think in this world, this is the first time that he has shot and killed somebody. So
okay. A big thing, arguably, possibly for anyone, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know it was for me. So
okay. All right. Good to know.
See the outtakes, everybody. No, I'm kidding. Hannibal changes the subject away from Will's mental state to the fungi case, and then they start speculating on what the killer could have wanted, and you know, they bring up connection, which is obviously our theme in this episode. I love these little conversations about like, let's catch serial killers together. This is so cute and good. I love it. Like, let's keep talking about this.
I know. I know, right? It's like Hannibal is like, okay, so like, I know that you like this, so we're going to talk about it. I'm going to learn everything that there is to learn about this thing so that you and I can have something to talk about, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Like, oh my God.
Yeah. During this conversation, we see on the outside that Freddie Lowndes is outside the door using a listening device to eavesdrop and record this conversation. And she's kind of almost caught by Hannibal using the listening device, but that she plays it off, and then she's pretending to be a new patient who is interviewing potential therapists. It takes Hannibal about 0.6 seconds to completely see through this, and he just calls her Freddie Lowndes. And then in this way that Mads does so well, like demands that she hand over the bag and the listening device, and it's not threatening per se, but it's so terrifying. It's so scary. And eventually she just like...
I think I was watching this and I was like on Discord being like, is he going to eat her? Like, what's going on?
And eventually she confesses that she's been recording this session, recording Will's session.
Mm-hmm. I love that her, like, quote unquote feminine wiles don't really work on Hannibal, like don't work at all actually on Hannibal, because she's obviously a very good looking white woman. You know, we saw her earlier. She was basically using like her white privilege and her pretty privilege to like get info out of that cop, right? And you can immediately tell that this is a this is a pretty practiced behavior. She's done this before. This is not her first time. It's like, it's also a mask that she's using to get close to people and to use them. And like, arguably, Hannibal also wears a mask, right? To be able to get close to people and to eat them, in his case. And he sees right through her immediately. And I just kind of, like, it takes one to see one, to know one, you know? Like, I appreciated that.
Yeah, it's really good. And she's obviously, I don't think we specifically mentioned it. Like the first time we see Freddie Lounge, she's like wet from the shower and only wearing a towel. Like she's absolutely set up to be like a sex object. And to have,
there is no towel. She's naked. I was like, oh my
that's right.
God.
Yeah,
she's
absolutely.
like naked.
I love to.
She's sitting down. I'm like, oh,
love to post,
cover your boobs.
Love to post on my internet blog fully naked and sitting in an office chair. Great, just fun times that I like to have. He calls her up to the sofa.
Well, did I not tell you, Jeremy? I am like naked right now to record this podcast,
yeah,
right? Like no clothes whatsoever. There are no clothes. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I just thought that was a choice from the show to put her fully naked in front of her computer posting crime pictures. I was like, okay, so there's going to be like some sexuality attached to this.
And then to have it not work on Hannibal later too, I think it's a good like come back around to that moment. Just like you mentioned, of this is completely failing to have any effect on Hannibal whatsoever, because Hannibal is seemingly like not interested in sex whatsoever. Like we haven't seen any of that stuff from him. He calls her over,
or certainly not in sex with this woman at the very least, right?
He calls her over to the sofa. They sit down. He has her delete the audio. He says, "You've been terribly rude, Miss Lowndes. What's to be done about that?" In that very creepy Mads Mikkelsen way. Obviously, rudeness is something that, again, Hannibal abhors. So, like, you're very scared about what he's going to do in this moment.
It was just so concerning. Like, I was concerned.
We skip ahead a little bit to where Jack and Hannibal are having a meal. Hannibal has prepared and served the meal. Jack talks about how his mother was a terrible cook, which is like kind of weird thing to talk about. And it's
right.
From the outset, it's a very tense conversation where they're obviously friendly, but they're kind of trading, if not barbs, then like loaded expressions back and forth with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what adds to the tension is also something, because again, like I was watching this and I texted you and I was like, oh my God, like, is he feeding him people? Like, what is happening? Because you never really, and you said to me, like, every time that they're eating on this show, or every time that Hannibal is serving food to somebody else, like, there's immediately that tension that's added, because you can never really know if he's like serving them people or not. And It's like, so much tension. And it's like served in like this really red sauce that looks like blood again, you know, like blood. Anyway,
it's so good. And it doesn't help that, like, I think the dishes themselves are so abnormally amazing, right? Like I mentioned last time, they have a professional chef on the staff to like consult with all this stuff and make these like what I would consider like fine dining dishes that Hannibal's just making in his house for his friends. I guess is what you would call Jack to Hannibal.
I suppose.
So they look kind of outlandish, I think, to somebody who's not accustomed to fine dining, right? Like they look kind of crazy to begin with, and then you think about what he could be putting in them. It could be anything, and you just don't know. So they have a conversation about broken ponies. There's some real funny horse chat in the outtakes of this week's episode, if you guys want to go back to that. In this case, broken ponies are referring to FBI agents that are broken, that have had mental issues where they could not come back to work. And Jack, kind of in the middle of this, realizes like, hey, I've already had my psych eval. Like, you don't have to like break me down. And Hannibal says, not by me. And I love that. Whoa. Absolutely adore that.
I love that he's doing to Jack what he did to Will last episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We go back to Quantico, where they are beginning to autopsy the bodies. And here we learn a little bit more about the killer's methodology. All of these victims died from kidney failures. And we learn that Will believes that the killer is inducing a diabetic coma in the victims. So basically they're completely asleep, but they're producing these nutrients that the killer wants for his mushrooms. And like going from this, you already have it in your notes. I don't want to take it from you, but like I remember,
no, go ahead.
Just going from this directly to Hannibal's dining room is something else, right? Like it's amazing.
Yeah, Because like obviously you've got this like huge contrast in color because you're going from like these dark rich colors, like this very like the classical music that's playing, and like there's basically on the table there may or may not be like dead people on the plates, and you're moving to the autopsy room that like visually is very like white and clinical with like no sounds, like it's very stale, right? Very cold, and there is definitely a dead body on the table, right? And it's like the possible similarity and the difference is just, it broke my brain, truly.
It's intense. It's absolutely intense.
Yeah.
From here we go to a young woman picking up her insulin prescription. I did not know this until I was researching this episode, but this character and this actress, but the character under the same name, appeared in one of Brian Fuller's previous show, Wonder Falls, which is I don't know that there's any kind of important connection here, or I think it's just a neat little like nod, basically.
That's cool.
It's just interesting, I thought, so I wanted to bring it up. And the pharmacist, seeing this person, like very quickly switches the prescription. Like he switches the bag real quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he gives her basically rapid acting insulin instead of long acting insulin. And so like, because I didn't know this, but like if you, as a diabetic, if you take rapid acting insulin thinking that it's long acting, it can actually cause an overdose and therefore a diabetic coma, and which is clearly what this guy is aiming for, right?
Yes, 100%. Does not seem like he is a good dude whatsoever. And I love this because I think in a lot of shows we would have had like several more steps before we can figure out who the pharmacist is and do all this stuff. But here we literally just cut to the next scene to the FBI agents and the local police like surrounding this pharmacy. They've already put together the pattern. We're just going to go after him. Unfortunately, the pharmacist was alerted, and we'll talk about that in a little bit about how. So that he left before the FBI could get there. They search his car though, and in his trunk, buried in a bunch of dirt, is this young woman that we saw earlier, still alive, and just it's a horrible. I can't imagine being buried alive in the back of a car, like in the back of a
Absolutely
Buick Regal
terrifying.
from 1998. Jesus Christ! Like, have some class. What are we doing?
I mean, that's truly the part that is horrifying to me,
Right?
right?
Thank you.
Like the make and model of the car.
Yeah. Nobody likes Buicks. Come on, let's get out of here.
There you go.
Buy a Cadillac. You're a pharmacist. What are you doing?
Well, I was going to say, like, so tell me, Jeremy, what kind of car would you like to be buried alive in?
I want something that's going to make you question the car note every month. I want you to look at your car note and be like, is this worth it? And yeah, absolutely it is. I want something high profile for me.
Okay. All right. Noted.
They go back to I believe this character's name is Eldon. I should have probably looked it up before doing this. Is there characters in this Wikipedia page? Of course not. Why would there be? But
that would be useful.
It is Eldon.
If they did that, and I guess they just don't. Oh,
it
is.
ELD Eldon Stamets. There we go. Doing the research live on the podcast. What everybody likes. They find title crime in Eldon's browser history, very specifically an article about Will Graham, and this is how he was notified to leave early. He was like, "Oh shit, they're on to me!" Like he was like, "Oh crap, I gotta get out of here." We also see I lost my place in the notes. We also see Hannibal reading this.
You are here.
And Hannibal is very, very upset about this. He does not like this at all.
He's so mad. Like seething rage, right? He is like in a silent rage at the moment. And I'm like, he is definitely going to eat her. Like that's what's going to happen. 100%.
We need a new segment of the show. Mary's predictions. Who's going to get eaten from this episode?
No, actually, I think my predictions would be when would Freddy get eaten? Like, I think that's the question.
How many episodes will Freddy survive uneaten is what we need to know.
Yes. Has Freddy survived this episode? Yes or no? Is going to be the recurring question.
And speaking of Freddy, we go to her hotel room where the FBI burst in, zip tie her up, and basically Jack begins to like berate her. And say that he's going to arrest her for obstruction of justice, and she says, "You can't arrest me for anything." Like she's not really afraid because she knows the law. And I think interestingly, they talk about her using people and like where she got her information. And we saw her talk to the cop at the crime scene, But here, when everybody leaves and they cut her loose, it's one of Beverly's team that leans over and says, "You used me," and then it cuts her loose. So she actually had like the inside track to this.
Well, right. So, oh my God, I have so many conflicting feelings about this because like it feels like everybody here is the asshole, you know, like everybody here sucks because like I hate her as a character already and I have no respect for what she does. And like this whole thing of intimidating people by like the police force, by the FBI in this case, like is a perfect example of like law enforcement overstepping. And like, again, I think that one of the reasons why she comes out of this almost unscathed is specifically because she's white, right? If we look at like power dynamics in real life. And it's like, you know, if you can indict her or arrest her for obstructing justice, then just do that. Don't go into her motel room and like scare her to death. Like who is this helping? I don't know.
It's exactly what you said. Like, this is just overstepping. Jack knows that he has no actual recourse, right?
Of
like
course.
he knows that he's not going to indict her, but he still wants to scare her. Unfortunately, Freddie doesn't look like the kind of person that can really be scared. Freddie looks like the kind of person that would treat this as like all the more reason to do what she does, for better or for worse.
Yeah, exactly.
We go back to Abigail's room, where Will is just kind of watching over Abigail. And then he begins to dream, and we see this large black stag walking in the hallway. And I think he like tries to chase it for a little bit, and then he just wakes up. Oh no, I'm sorry. We go to the real world where Alana Bloom arrives at Abigail's hospital room and like sees Will dreaming and covers him up with a blanket. And then she begins to read to Abigail a book from Flannery O'Connell about really stupid birds, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah. Anyway, I have thoughts that I'm very excited to get to about this because I'm like, what? Why is she there?
Yeah, I think that's the good question. Like, is she there for Will or is she there for Abigail? Did she know Will was going to be here?
Right.
Has Will been here so much that this is like how they know to find Will now? And as Will wakes up, he observes the same thing that Jack observed, or that Alana told Jack in the first episode, which is they have never been in a room by themselves together. And Alana just kind of brushes this off, right? She doesn't like treat it as anything serious, but she specifically told this to Jack in the first episode, so I think it's important to talk about.
Well, okay. So in your notes, you actually have she plays innocent, and so when I first watched this, I was like, but is she lying to him, or is the show like already retconning something that just happened last episode, right? That seemed to be quite important about her never having been in a room alone with Will because she wants to be his friend. But the fact that you kind of says like plays innocent tells me that maybe it's probably option one. And it makes me really angry because now it feels like almost everybody in Will's life that he's like forming some kind of connection to is either like lying to him or trying to manipulate him, or even both, you know, like you've got Jack, you've got Hannibal, and now you've got Alana. And I'm just like, this boy just needs a break. Like
he needs a friend.
My poor baby. Yes, a friend.
He just
an
needs
actual
a friend. Someone who is not related to the murder business.
Exactly.
When I said Alana plays innocent here, I think what I was referring to, I wasn't trying to like foreshadow anything specifically. I feel like she kind of just brushed the question off innocently, like where she didn't even want to get into the topic. And to me that reads as her having specifically done this throughout their entire relationship, but not wanting to actually get into that in this conversation, right? Like she's playing innocent, like how could that possibly be, like kind of thing. What do you like? She's gaslighting.
Yeah, I feel like she's on. Well, there you go. Because I'm like, I feel like she's like, oh, have we really? I've never noticed. Although, like,
exactly.
We're not completely alone right now. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Ugh. I'm very upset about this.
Alana points out that. Well, they go back and forth a little bit. Again, the dialogue in the show is great. Eventually, Will's like, we can talk or not talk about anything that you want to. Just like saying, yeah, he's just happy for her presence to be here. And Alana points out that Abigail is a success for Will and tells him not to feel sorry for himself. And he's like, actually, no, I feel good. And we go from here into this like very like kind of almost hallucinogenic kind of swirling. And as it solidifies on the screen, we realize it's the swirl of like creamer and coffee. And we see Freddie Lowndes, leaving her hotel, and then we see the cop that she talked to at the crime scene, who has now been fired. And she's not sympathetic at all. In fact, she seems like well prepared for this, where she's like, I can get you work. There's some private eyes. You know, we can get you set up with a camera. And he's like, you've done this before. Like, this is, you knew what was going to happen. And I thought that this is a very cool moment, because you think like this is going to be a big confrontation, and instead our killer Eldon walks up, shoots the cop in the head, and starts like haranguing Freddy about who Will Graham is.
Well, this was one of those moments in this episode where I was like, wow, that was really unexpected. Like, I did not expect for it to happen that way. And I didn't, like, you're just, you know, this episode, and I don't know if this is going to be the same way for the series, but this episode has a way of like just taking you places that like you weren't expecting as a viewer, that kind of break a lot of like narrative norms almost, which I love, because it means that like the showrunner knows that this is a narrative norm, and he's choosing not to use it. And I'm just like, I love it so much. Give me more.
Later on, somehow he did not kill Freddy. Which seems like almost a narrative thing of like, we just want this character around. It seems like he would have just shot this woman, but whatever. And Jack interviews her and finds out that Stannis has this desire for connections, for having people make connections. And she told him everything that she knew about Will and Abigail. And she says he wants them to connect. He's going to bury her. So he literally wants to take Will and Abigail and bury them to make them connect with one another, which is fucking wild. It's not, that's serial killer territory all the way.
Like, that's bonkers, right? Like, that's crazy people talk, right? Like,
oh yeah, this is definitely like out the box. And then we see Eldon arriving at the hospital that Will is at. He steals a badge and some scrubs. We see Will arriving at the same time. He gets the phone call from Jack, and as he rushes into Abigail's room, he realizes that Abigail is already gone. And Will begins to search the hospital, and somehow finds him. If you've ever been in a hospital before, you know that this is impossible to go somewhere and find somebody. Like, it's impossible. Hospitals are like IKEAs with mean nurses everywhere. Like, it's just miserable.
I work in a hospital that has like it's got like different wings also within the hospital. Like, it's a quote unquote super hospital. Like, it's a huge hospital. I couldn't even find like a specific room when I was there the first time. There is no way that you can find a person who is walking around without some kind of identification. Anyway, movie magic.
Jack instantly shoots him. I think this is also playing into some of the things we talked about. Like, does Jack have the ability to pull the trigger? Does his but his killing of Garrett Jacob Hobbs, like, is that going to prevent him from being able to shoot in the future? And no, he pulls his gun, he shoots, he wings Garrett Jacob Hobbs. And he rushes over, kicks the gun away, checks on Abigail, and then starts looking at Eldon, who kind of starts ranting about psilocybin, the mushrooms having connections, responding to people as they walk over, like mushroom fields. And he says specifically, I love this line so much, I know you've been reaching for her. You should have let me plant her. She could have reached back. And I think what's not, I think, explicitly clear right now is that Abigail has been in a coma this entire time. Like, she hasn't woken up.
Yeah.
This is the idea of her reaching back is like him he's going to facilitate this connection between Jack and Abigail that he believes Jack wants more than anything. I keep saying Jack. Will. Jack is not in this scene. Mary, Jack is not anywhere near this scene right now. Jesus.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, good.
I don't know why you keep bringing him up, but that's the case.
I don't know. I must have Jack on my mind. I'm sorry. But like, listen, so this is what we were talking about when we were saying like, this is bonkers, right? Because like, I personally really hate saying that people who kill other people are mentally ill, because I think that that's pretty intellectually lazy. But like, this is really giving delusion. Like, this is bonkers, like I was saying earlier. But I do think that it shows something about Will and Abigail, particularly about Will, because we know that Will clearly feels a sense of responsibility towards her. But again, she doesn't know who he is, right? And to use the words of like Eldon, he's reaching out to her, but she's not reaching back because she's in a coma. And I don't know, maybe this is me overthinking this, but I kind of wonder if Will isn't a little concerned about what's going to happen when she wakes up. Because, like, it would make a lot of sense for her to be like, no, you killed my dad. I never want to see you again. And so Will would lose that connection. So maybe the fact that she's in a coma, just like, you know, Eldon's victims, kind of makes it easier for Will to stay connected to her at the moment.
Yes. Yes to all of this. And I also want to bring up something that plays into this as well. You mentioned, you know, Will and his fear of losing this connection. Also, like Jack's belief that Abigail could be part of the killings, right? Also kind of plays into that a little bit for Will. So it's just fascinating. Like it's so good. And I'm kind of with you on the it's real easy to be like, oh, this dude's fucked in the head, so he's murdering people or whatever. Unfortunately, I think we're gonna see some of that with our quote unquote monster of the week killers, just because I think it's an easy narrative shortcut for people. So it's like, oh, this dude's like messed up in the head, so he's planting people in the ground or whatever. It's not always like that though, which is good. So. We're going to cut over to Hannibal's office, where Will has gone to after this traumatic experience, making it the second time that Will has reached out to Hannibal right after something intense has happened in his life. And he wonders if Will is protecting himself against the quote-unquote zest that he feels after killing Garrett Jacob Hobbs. Not necessarily because he likes the killing, but because he did it for Abigail. And this is going to be kind of the structure of this conversation, right? Like where they're going to say, did you really feel so bad because killing him felt so good? And Will confesses, I liked killing Hobbs. And Hannibal responds to that with, killing must feel good to God too. And he talks about a church tragedy where a church fell in and killed its parishioners. I don't think this is ever going to get brought up again, so I don't think this is a spoiler, but I want to mention it to you because it's kind of a big Hannibal deal. In the books and in the kind of the larger fiction, Hannibal collects stories about this, of anytime a church collapse happens, anytime a plane crashes into a church or a plane full of church people crash. Like this is like a delicious irony to him, of God like killing his own worshipers, right? Like I think there's something there of like him thinking like that's how he treats people, right? Like Hannibal treats himself like a god, and he's killing the people that worship him. Yeah. This is all just so fucking good. I just love all of this so much. It's like there's so much to this dialogue that I can't even get into. Like it's just I just get crazy about it.
Well, I mean, it's all really, really good, right? Like, and it's also interesting because here, like, so we saw them in his office like 3 times so far in this episode, and every time Will has gotten closer and closer, and now he's actually sitting in the chair in front of him, right? So there's like that physical proximity that's just been increasing and increasing over the episode. And there's even a moment where Will tells Hannibal, like, you're supposed to be my paddle. And I'm like, oh my God, he's already his something. That went fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, there's also this moment where Hannibal says something about giving voice to the unmentionable, and I really, really love that. And obviously, in the context of this show, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't bode well for anybody, but I do think that it's very relatable.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like those thoughts that we never ever talk about because they're too dark or too ugly or they're just too much of something, like Hannibal is really creating a space for Will where he can actually voice them. And not be questioned in his sanity or anything like that, right? So there's this giving voice to the unmentionable. And again, I do think that this is going to end terribly, particularly for Will, which sucks for him. But in the meantime, having that space, after probably never having had it before, must be like such a relief, like the therapy that he actually needed.
Well, and just to go back to his conversation with Beverly in the first episode, where she said, that this test is to weed out the unstable. Are you unstable? He's always been in a position where he's not comfortable admitting the things in his brain because he realizes that he'll either be taken advantage of, like with Jack, or he'll be ostracized as a law enforcement agent, like by Beverly, right? Like it's one or the other. So now having that space, like you said, has to be a huge relief where he can privately talk about these things that are in his brain. And you're right. Without spoilers, it's probably not going to end well. Not going to go well for old Will.
I mean,
he's going to
I don't
go
even
through
think
some
that's
stuff.
A spoiler. Listen, I don't think that this is a spoiler. I think that it's pretty clear that it's not going to end well for Will. Like none of this is going to end well, probably for anybody, but particularly not for Will. My poor baby.
But what a just an amazing episode. I think I will say this: it keeps getting better from here, in my opinion. This first season is a real triumph, and I'm very excited to explore it with you, especially you having no context for what's about to happen. And I'm so excited that I will literally probably go watch the third episode right after we get off this phone call. So,
to be honest with you, I mean, I have to go do stuff, but I will probably do the same like later on tonight because I have laundry to do, and you can be sure that
you're going to France for 2 weeks, Mary. Come on, pack. You have to pack.
I know. Okay, listen. So I have a system for oh my god. So again, it's the undiagnosed autism of it all, but like I have an actual system for when I need to go somewhere. Like I have a running list of the things that I'm going to need, then I add the things that I want to bring specifically for this trip, and then I just make sure that everything is ready, and then I move everything to one room and I just pack. So it's actually really easy.
It sounds especially easy on your brain, I will say. It sounds extremely easy for you to have designed the system over the course of 20 or 30 years and then to have implemented it and now to be activated every time you take a trip. Super easy is how I would describe it. Yeah.
You know, it's sometimes it's one of those things where like I don't realize something and then I say it out loud and I'm like, you sound absolutely insane.
Don't worry.
You sound like you're not well.
I have some childhood stories that I used to tell because I thought they were very funny. And then like someone one day was like, that's not, maybe you should think about that. And I was like, oh, whoops.
Actually, same. Like one day I was telling this, like, anyway, there's one particular story that I was telling to somebody and they're like, oh, that's messed up. And I'm like, no, it was funny.
It's totally cool.
Like, was it though? It was not, readers. It was not.
Do you have any last thoughts about this before we get into our review section?
No, just that I'm incredibly excited about episode 3, frankly. Intrigued.
All right, let's go to reviews. Alrighty. All right, and we're back with our review section. Mary, why don't you start us off?
All right, so I will give this episode 4 stars. The homegrown shiitakes gave flavor and depth to an already delicious episode that makes me quite hungry for the next one.
And I'm also going to give this episode 4 stars. It's an earthy flavor that hits the palate to start, and then the taste buds are overwhelmed with flavors that remind you of home and family, of connections and taste shared with friends.
I love that. It's really nice to bring people around a table to eat other people, you know? Like we love that on this podcast.
That's going to be our episode. This is the second episode we've recorded, and now we're a little bit further along in the actual podcast creation process, so I can say that I want to thank Alex Dreams Art for our beautiful, beautiful cover art that is almost finished. I know it's going to be beautiful just from the sketches that Alex is sending over.
It's already beautiful.
Yeah, it's incredible. And all of the music you've been hearing this episode, including the rapper at the very beginning, is our friend Jake Lionheart. So check out the show notes for both of those artists' profiles and way to get them on social media. Thank you to everybody listening. Please leave ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and anywhere else. Tell your friends. If you know a bunch of cannibals that could be interested, I mean, I don't know what that relationship is like. Like suggesting a podcast to a cannibal could be fraught, maybe. I don't know, but try it. See if they'll like the episode.
Right. I mean, eventually we're going to have some stuff to binge, so maybe they'll be more into that.
Yes.
But we'll see. There you go. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Hello.
Yay. Okay, you can hear me.
I can. Loud and clear.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm always so concerned. I'm like, will it work this time? As if this has ever not worked, but it's just like, I guess.
I think it's the podcaster's curse to be paranoid about audio and audio devices and all of this various stuff because it feels so fragile, like it could just blow up at any point in time.
Honestly, I think that's probably the best way of describing it. Like, you just never know when it's going to work or not.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. So I'm going to need a couple of seconds just to like set myself up again because I opened Chrome and then I was like, oh, wait, I don't need Safari anymore. So I closed Safari, but all my notes were in there. So great. Useful. Oh my God. Well, I'm happy that you can record today. I'm very excited about that.
Same. I'm very, very
As
happy.
if it's not like me that's been a problem this week.
No, not at all. Don't ever call yourself a problem. It's not.
I mean, sometimes I am the problem and that's okay. I know that.
Hi, it's me.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for quoting Dr. Taylor Allison Swift. I appreciate that.
I think I got the quote backwards, but that's okay. I'm not as big of a fan as you are. So,
listen,
okay.
I knew where you were going, and I think that's what really mattered, right? Like that's really what we want.
That's all that matters.
All right. So I'm recording on my end. You're probably recording as well.
Yep.
So that's good.
We'll go ahead and start Zencaster. The recording is finished. No, recording is started.
Oh.
Okay, perfect.
Lovely.
I didn't use the Zencaster audio at all last time. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Cool.
And I've got it.
Cool.
I've got it set up so that I can just drop your audio into the project, and then all of the settings that we went over last time are just there, so it should automatically be applied.
Nice.
So I don't have to go through and do that every time. But obviously, like, I'll send you episodes early, and if there's any changes or whatever that you want me to make, just let me know. So
okay, cool. I mean, it should be okay. I'm not too worried about it. It's just so long as the declicking is there, we're good to go.
Yeah, I'm glad that my version of Isotope had that, and it was like the exact same settings. It was really convenient. I'm 5 versions behind yours, but hey, it's all the exact same stuff. So.
I mean, well, so anyway, I'm not going to comment on, what is it called? Planned obsolescence, I think it is.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, where they're like, oh yeah, let's make this thing every year. Let's make a new version of this thing every year that will have very, very slight differences that will make people want to get the new version.
Yay. Welcome to the world of software. You have to absolutely love it.
Exactly.
Why is Chris texting? Shut up, Chris. Go away. I'm recording.
No, shut up, Chris. Oh, you guys are recording too. I'm so excited to hear next week's episode. Actually, I'm probably not going to be able to listen to next week's episode.
You'll be in France.
I'll be in France.
Our podcasts are available in France too, so don't worry. You can still download it. Just download the episode, tell your family that you're going to be busy for a little while, and then just go into another room, put your headphones on, and experience the magic.
So I need an hour, okay, by myself.
You're going to need a break.
Listen to Chris and Jeremy's podcast.
You're going to need a break. Like, there's no question.
I am going to need a break.
You'll have been around your family for so long that you'll be like, I cannot take this. I need some time to myself. So,
that's kind of the good thing of not having your family like live super close to where you are, is that you see them so little that like, it's okay to spend 2 weeks with them once a year. Like you don't like, you know what I mean? Like I don't see them at Christmas. I don't see them at my birthday. I never see them. And so it's like, yeah, sure. I'll spend 2 weeks with you this summer. Like I'm okay with that.
I'm like within driving distance from all my family, but it's just enough of a driving distance to make it a question of you, if, like, do we really want to do it or not? Like, so it's the perfect amount of space to be like, we can absolutely come over anytime, but it's just far enough to be like, we're not going to drop by on a Saturday unannounced, right? Like, because that's the kind of stuff I cannot stand. So.
Oh yeah, it's like we can come over whenever we want, but do we really want to?
Exactly,
and I think that's a good balance to strike.
When we got go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when we got married, we like moved like to a different state, like far away from all of our families, and friends.
Wow.
And I think it really worked out because like it just was just me and Autumn. Like we could only really talk to one another. Like you know what I'm saying? Like so it made us focus on like all of our newlywed issues that we may or may not have had, and like we couldn't go like run to the boys or run to the girls or run to mom or run to dad or whoever. You know what I'm saying? Like so we just had to work the shit out of ourselves. So it was good.
That's actually really nice. Like good for you guys. The ultimate test.
did not plan it that way at all. Like it wasn't like it's not like we meant to. We just wanted to move. So.
Yeah, but sometimes I don't know. I think life works out in some ways that you never really expect, and then now looking back, you're like, oh my god, like I can't believe that this worked out this way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited for your trip. It's gonna be super awesome.
Oh, me too. I mean, so long as they're. Oh my god, the horse.
I wasn't going to bring up the horse just in case you didn't want this on the podcast,
I know.
Yeah,
it's fine. It can go on the podcast. I tweeted about it on Twitter. It's fine.
It was weird when you told me this, because it's one of those situations that's so outlandish and ludicrous that you instantly laugh. Like you treat it like a humorous situation, and then obviously, like the more you think about it, you're like, wait a minute, this dude is like stalking my girl. Like that's not like in no way is this behavior okay or funny. It's just the fact that it's a horse. Like this adds this comedic element to it that you can't help. Like you can't stop.
I was talking to one of my friends yesterday because she came out from the city to hang out with me out in the boonies, as she calls it. And I was like, what's the most outlandish gift that a man has ever given you? And so she names a couple of things, and I'm like, do you want to hear mine? And I'm like, well, I just found out that a man bought me a horse. And she goes, oh.
What?
Huh, that's funny.
And not even like, because I can definitely see if you were in a relationship with somebody and they bought you an outlandish gift, like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I've been with my wife. I've been married for 20 years. She's a certified horse person. The night we met, she took me to her horse barn. Like, she is a tried and true horse person her entire life. I would never, ever, ever, ever buy her a horse. Like, just never in a million years would it even occur to me. Like, I would help fund if she wanted a horse, right? Like, yeah, sure, let's go, go buy you a horse. But like, the idea that you would just buy a horse from somebody who is not equipped to own a horse, ride a horse, feed a horse. Like, there's so much. It's so much. It's like that. It's like buying somebody a puppy, but the puppy is literally 2,000 pounds and needs to be fed so much food every day. Like, I don't even like. I don't know what the end game was of like, oh, I'm going to buy you a horse and then you're going to fall in love with me. Like, that is wild thinking.
It's so wild. It's so wild. And that's why, like, I mean, again, I've talked about this because I put this on Twitter, and so I'm going to be open about it. But like, I called my dad, Jeremy. Like, do you like,
yeah.
I haven't called my dad for like a favor
for, like,
in
help
15
with a boy.
years. With a boy. That's never happened. I have literally never called my dad about like a boy who wasn't leaving me alone. Like, that has never happened. I've always been able to handle that. But the freaking horseman, I was like, I cannot deal with this. Like, I am not emotionally equipped.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Like,
I don't know.
I just, again, like, I'm so fascinated with I just, I've been in my, as a teenager, I had some magical thinking when it came to women, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do a thing and they're going to fall in love with me. And I think like movies and TV shows and like books and some of that stuff like plays a part into like being this like, oh, I'm going to be this romantic boy and the woman's going to fall in love with me and we're destined, we're soulmates. Just like, but again, I was a teenager. Like, I was like literally like my brain had not fully developed yet. Like, I was a complete fucking idiot. So I can't imagine being a fully grown adult and thinking, buy the horse, get the girl. Like, I'm just, it's just wild to me. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. Like, it's just, I'm so glad that you were able to deal with it ahead of time. So like, when you go there, you're not going to have to be worried. Like, it's not going to take up precious like time with your family. So.
I mean, so my sister was because she's the one who told me about this horse thing, because I don't talk to this person anymore, right? Like, and so she's like, I felt like I needed to tell you because I couldn't imagine your reaction if like we got to the house and he was there waiting with the horse. like just outside. Like, it would be weird enough if he just showed up at your house with the horse. Like, just in general, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I'm carrying my horse around with me. But like the idea that like, oh, here's this horse and like he just hands the reins to you and you're like, what do I do with this? It's so bizarre. Because like, the thing is, like,
you don't ride, right? Like,
So not only do I not ride, but like I haven't spent a lot of time with horses in my life in general. And it's not like I dislike them or anything like that, right? I love horses, but I do love them from a distance because like, I know from what I know of horses, they scare really easy and they're very, very big and unaware of how big they are compared to us. And I'm like, I don't know enough about your body language that I can tell if you're going to start running or if you're going to kick or if you're going to do this or that. So like, I love them from far away. And just the idea that somebody would, I don't know, I don't even know how to say this. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because maybe I would become a horse person eventually if I was around them enough. But like, I am not in the state of things, right?
No, and you don't live on a horse farm. Like, it's not like you have.
I don't.
Like,
no.
were you supposed to take the horse home with you? Like, what is? Do you have to? Because you can fly a horse. Like, you can fly horses. Like, they have special like airlines that fly horses across the country, across like the world and stuff, right? Like, you can do that.
Yeah, I know that because I have a friend who does that for a living. Like, she organizes livestock transfer from country to country, and so I would technically be able to fly the horse if I really wanted to. But like, what am I going to do? Put it in my apartment?
Yeah, like don't you? I live on the third floor, homie. Like, what am I going to do? Walking up the stairs? Like, what are you doing? It's not accessible to horses.
Am I going to take it to the municipal pool every so often?
Right?
Like, what do I do? Oh.
God, can you imagine? Like,
but that's the thing. Like, anyway, this person just like, I think the reason why I didn't want to pursue anything with this person is specifically because I felt that he didn't listen to me, and I'm like, this is exactly what I'm talking
this
about,
is
like
it. Yeah,
to the nth degree,
it.
Obviously, like, but this is it, right? Anyway, the horse.
Insane. It's absolutely insane thing to have to go through. I would never. I don't think the weirdest thing, and this is not a romantic situation. It was just a weirdly awkward situation. Autumn and I have an old friend from like Autumn's college days, and we caught back up with her. Let's say like 15, 16 years later, right? And she was in a weird housing situation, but she ended up like staying with us for a couple of months, which was no big deal. Like, you know, she left early, you know, like it was not a huge deal at all.
Okay.
But one night, Autumn makes dinner, and Autumn has this like dish that she does. It's kind of one of our casual weekday dishes. It's called conchigle, which is just like a meat sauce on pasta. So Autumn makes conchigle, and we all eat it, and everything's great. And then Autumn goes out of town for work. And the next day, our friend, who again I've not had any kind of romantic situation with whatsoever, is like, I'm going to make dinner tonight to thank y'all. And I'm like, well, it's weird that you chose a night that Autumn's not here, but okay, sure. And then she proceeds to make the exact same dish that Autumn made the night before. And, and I was just like, and it was fine. Like, it's not a hard dish. God. Like, but I mean, like, you know, it's just one of those weird. And so I'm like texting Autumn. I was like, yeah,
that's super weird.
I don't want to say the woman's name, but like, you know, so and so made, you know, conchigle tonight, and she's like, what? Like, are you like really? Very strange.
So we all thought it was weird then, is what's going on.
And I was like, look, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to say no. Like, it was one of those weird situations where you're just like, I'm in, I guess, and I'm going to have this experience and then get out of it as soon as possible. So
I feel like sometimes you the easiest way out is through, and I think this is one of those situations, right? Like, and luckily for me, I was able to avoid that, like to avoid the conversation about the horse, but I did have to have it with my father. So I don't know. I don't know which one is worse, frankly.
Which is, I mean, I think it's better, but only because like you obviously have a relationship with your father and he's looking out for you. Like, who knows what this dude would have said to you? Like, he's already not listening to you. So if you'd be like, no, I don't have any room for a horse, he'd be like, I'll get you room. Like, no, you're not listening to me.
Exactly.
Oh, anyway,
so weird.
So
I mean, my dad did have a really good sense of humor about it, because so everybody that I said this to had a really interesting first question to this, right? Like, you asked, do you have to take the horse, right? That was your first
concerned.
question.
Yeah, like, are you obligated? Does French culture mean like you have to accept the gift? Like, you can't, you're literally going to look the gift horse in the mouth? Like, what are you doing? Like, do you have to have it?
Autumn asked, what kind of horse, right? That's what she asked.
Autumn is still asking me that. Like, she was like when I came back here to record, she was like, make sure you find out what horse it is. And I was like, I don't know that she knows. Like, I don't know that we'll ever know.
I don't know that I'll ever know, but if I do find out, you and Autumn will be the first people to know. I promise you that, okay? Like, I will be jumping to Discord to let you all know. Promise. Another one of my friends asked, an entire horse?
Good question. Excellent question. Not just a head.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad asked, why a horse? Which I feel was a
Excellent
really
question.
good question.
Very excellent
right?
question. Yeah, gets to the heart of
Right?
the matter very quickly. Like why a horse is very, very a very interrogatory question. Like it gets right down to the quick. So,
And I think it's also because like one of the issues that my dad and I have had in the past is that I always kind of said that like he didn't really know me and my likes and dislikes. So he was like, "Do you like horses?"
it's a good question. Like, you only see each other 2 weeks out of the year, right? So like who knows what's happened since the last time you talked? Like you could have developed a horse thing.
Yeah.
You never know.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, my poor dad. Like in this particular moment, you could tell that he was really trying, like he's like, "Do you like horses?" And I didn't know about this. I'm like, no.
Trying to be the supportive dad, but also like thinking like, what the fuck is this? What is happening?
Exactly. And then he kept a really good sense of humor about it because he was like, because I was like, listen, I didn't really want to talk to you about it because he is also like one of his friends. And and I was like, I just didn't want like to embarrass him, right? Like I didn't want him to feel embarrassed about this because it is embarrassing, right?
Sure.
And I was like, but the horse thing like really kind of forced my hand. Like I just couldn't let that go. And he was like, "Well, I guess you did have to get on your high horse."
Perfect.
Just like, fuck you.
Yes.
I can't believe you just made a dad joke in this moment.
I'm so glad. Not that I ever thought that there wouldn't, but it just never occurred to me that like you can have dad jokes in French, and that's just makes me very happy. The fact that dad jokes are universal is very exciting to me. So.
Regardless of language, dad jokes are like the universal language of dads.
Of course. Yeah. Dad jokes and smoking meats. Like those are the two things.
Actually, yeah, because my dad loves smoking meat.
I know, dude. I hit like 36 and I was like, I got to get a smoker. And like my inside brain was like, what? What did you just say out loud?
So that's a thing that happens then to men. And they're like, oh, I must start smoking meat. Like...
I've heard it said that like as you get older as a male, especially in the United States, you have two paths. Like you can go the World War II history buff, or you can go the smoking meats, make your own beer path. And I'm not making my own beer because I'm frankly lazy and like I have no confidence it would be better than what I could buy. But the smoking meats thing is definitely the path that I chose. So it's very funny.
I see. Well, that's good. That's good to know. I'll see if my dad starts, brewing his own beer anytime soon. I'll let you know.
It'll happen. Or probably like maybe making your own wine in France. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe he's smashing grapes. So. Yeah,
but I feel like he kind of feels the same way that you do about like beer, right? He's like, there's nothing that I can make that's going to be better than what I can buy.
Yeah. At a certain point, like I don't. Because
like
the novelty of making it myself is going to wear off like after the sixth bottle or something. So,
well, there you go. And I feel like my dad would probably feel that way too.
Autumn's dad was making beer for a while. And
cool.
He had a little homebrew kit in his apartment, and it was just universally awful. Just every single one. And he would like give them to me because like I'm the beer drinker in the family. He's like, "Oh, I got you another 6-pack, and it's this flavor and this flavor." And I would take a sip and I'm like, "Oof, my bud, this is not." I found an old bottle of it like in the back of a cabinet the other day, and I was like, I just want to throw this entire thing away. I don't even want to open it and save the bottle.
No.
Horrible person. I'm a horrible person.
Oh man. No moral judgment there.
Sure.
Oh man.
You want to get into it?
So I'm leaving it. Yeah. Just a quick thing before. So I wrote a thing for the intro. What do you think about it?
Love it. Absolutely.
Like,
I love the
really just simple so that it's. I know. I was like, you know what? Let's just be cheesy and like layer it on.
I've listened back to the title. Or the intro sample, and I'm pretty satisfied with you doing like the intro going into the music, and then I'll say like, "Hey, what are we covering today?" And then you can read the description, and then we can start getting back into the rest of the stuff. Like I like that format. I was thinking like maybe we could switch back and forth, but then I was thinking like it's gonna be so long between when we record this that like I'm not gonna remember who did what last. So let's just make Mary do all of the heavy lifting up front. So.
That's fine. Let's do it that way. I love it.
Cool.
That works. Plus, you're doing a lot of the beat by beat, so it works out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am ready to rock when you are.
All right. Well, let's go. Ooh, okay. I'm getting excited. All right.